Welcome to Elizabeth's Stories. Today we follow Margaret Sullivan, a wealthy widow, uncovering her son-in-law's deceit navigating family tensions and reclaiming her autonomy through bold risks. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly tales of mystery and empowerment. Share your thoughts below. Let's start the story. I've always believed silence holds more power than words. It's a lesson carved into me by years of navigating the glittering yet treacherous world my late husband Thomas built, a world of oceanfront mansions, whispered deals, and secrets buried beneath golden sands. When my daughter Sarah announced her engagement to Brad Mitchell, I held my tongue about the $30 million empire of beachfront properties Thomas left me. That silence I now know was my first act of defiance against the shadow creeping into our lives. A month after their wedding, when Brad appeared at my door with a lawyer and a smile sharp enough to cut glass, I was glad I'd kept my secrets close. Because I already knew the truth about him, a truth that would unravel everything. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and at 68, I'm no stranger to loss or betrayal. 2 years ago, Thomas's heart gave out on the deck of our Malibu estate, the Pacific stretching endlessly before him, as if mocking his mortality. He left me more than grief. He left me a legacy of properties along California's coast. Malibu, Carmel, Monterey, each a masterpiece of glass and stone, each a silent witness to our life together. They're worth $30 million as a fortune that hums with power and peril. I've spent my days since his death learning their rhythms, the way the tides whisper against the cliffs, the way the sunlight dances on polished floors. But I've also learned to sense danger, the kind that hides behind charming smiles and calculated promises. Sarah. My only child was always Thomas's shadow, his laughter echoing in hers. She's 32 now, with his stubborn heart and my sharp eyes, though she doesn't yet know how to wield them. Last Christmas, she brought Brad home to our Monterey estate, a man with a face too perfect, like a sculpture crafted to deceive. His eyes, a piercing blue, lingered too long on the crystal chandelier in my dining room, as if tallying its worth. "Mom, Brad's been through so much," Sarah said, her hand resting on his, as we sat at my mahogany table. "His first wife died in a car accident. He's finally ready to love again." Her voice trembled with devotion, but something in me stirred a primal instinct, like the ocean sensing a storm. I poured more wine, watching Brad's practiced grief, his lips curling into a smile that reminded me of a predator circling its prey. He spoke of loss, of rebuilding, of dreams that conveniently aligned with Sarah's hopes for a beachfront wedding. But his words felt rehearsed, each syllable a step in a dance I couldn't yet name. I nodded, played the gracious mother, but inside my mind was racing. I'd seen men like him before in the boardrooms. Thomas once ruled men who cloaked ambition in charm, who saw wealth as a game to be won. That night, as Sarah glowed with love, I made a vow I would protect her, even if it meant guarding secrets she wasn't ready to hear. The wedding was a spectacle held on a cliffside in Carmel, where the waves roared like an ancient chorus. Sarah was radiant in her grandmother's lace gown, her laughter mingling with the sea breeze. Brad played the devoted groom to perfection his vows, a symphony of promises to cherish and protect her forever. I stood among the guests, my silk handkerchief pressed to my eyes, not from joy, but from the weight of what I'd uncovered. 2 weeks before the wedding, I'd hired Frank Romano, a private investigator with a reputation for unearthing truths others couldn't find. His office, tucked in a gritty corner of downtown Monterey, smelled of stale coffee and old secrets. "Your son-in-law-to-be isn't who he says he is," Frank had told me, sliding a file across his cluttered desk. "His real name is Brandon Michelson. 3 marriages, all to wealthy widows. No death certificate for his first wife. She vanished after accusing him of theft. The file was a labyrinth of deception, credit card fraud, embezzlement charges that dissolved like mist, a pattern of reinventing himself with new names in new cities. Brad wasn't just a widower with a tragic past. He was a chameleon, a man who fed on vulnerability. I'd sat there, the weight of the truth pressing against my chest, and asked the only question that mattered. Is my daughter in danger? Frank's eyes, shadowed by years of chasing ghosts, met mine. If he's targeting your wealth, Mrs. Sullivan, she's not just a mark, she's leverage. I didn't tell Sarah. How could I? She was lost in love, blind to the cracks in Brad's facade. To her, he was salvation, a man who filled the void Thomas left. I couldn't shatter that illusion, not yet. Instead, I watched, waited, and let silence be my shield. The properties, my legacy, were mine alone, untouchable by community property laws or greedy hands. But I knew Brad would come for them as surely as the tides returned to the shore. 3 weeks after the wedding, he did. The doorbell chimed through my Monterey home, a sound as sharp as a warning bell. I opened the door to find Brad, his smile polished to a gleam, a briefcase in one hand and a man in a tailored suit at his side. Margaret Brad, said his voice smooth as honey. This is Robert Kane, my attorney. We need to talk about your family's future. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face serene, inviting them into the living room, where sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. I served coffee in my finest china, each movement deliberate, as if I were setting a trap rather than playing hostess. Brad sat across from me, his posture relaxed, but his eyes calculating. As Sarah's husband, he began, I'm entitled to understand our family's financial position. California's a community property state, after all. His words were a probe testing my defenses. I sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch. The properties were left to me alone, I said finally, my voice calm but edged with steel. Not to Sarah. Kane cleared his throat, his fingers twitching toward his briefcase. Mrs. Sullivan, while that's technically correct, we believe there are grounds for a more equitable arrangement. The audacity of it stole my breath. Equitable. As if my life's work, Thomas's legacy, was a prize to be divided. I leaned forward, my gaze locking onto Brad's. What kind of arrangement? I asked, my tone neutral, but my mind racing. Kane slid a document across the coffee table, its pages crisp with legal jargon. A family trust, he said. You'd retain control during your lifetime, but it ensures a smooth succession to Sarah and Brad. I scanned the document, my years with Thomas sharpening my instincts. Buried in the fine print was a clause that would grant Brad power of attorney if I were deemed incapacitated. A chill ran through me, not from fear, but from the clarity of their intent. I'll need time to review this with my attorney, I said, folding the papers with deliberate care. Brad's smile tightened, a flicker of impatience betraying his composure. Of course, Margaret, he said, but family should trust family. These properties are Sarah's inheritance too, aren't they? His words were a blade cloaked in concern, aimed at my heart. He wasn't just after the money. He was using my love for Sarah as leverage, just as Frank had warned. As they left, I stood by the window watching their car disappear down the coastal road. The ocean churned below its waves, a reminder of forces that could erode even the strongest foundations. I'd known Brad was dangerous, but now I felt the weight of his ambition, a shadow stretching across my daughter's future. I poured myself a glass of wine, the ruby liquid catching the fading light, and made another vow I would protect Sarah, not just from Brad, but from the truth that might break her. The game had begun, and I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was a woman with secret strength and a plan that would unravel the mystery of Brad Mitchell and test the limits of my own power. The ocean outside my Monterey home roared that night, its waves crashing against the cliffs as if echoing the storm brewing within me. Brad's visit with his lawyer, Robert Kane, had left a bitter taste, their proposal of a family trust, reeking of ambition, cloaked in false concern. I sat in my study, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across Thomas's old desk, the weight of his absence heavier than ever. But it wasn't grief that drove me. Now it was a fire, a quiet fury that had sparked the moment I saw Brad's calculating eyes linger on my chandelier. I knew he was no grieving widower, no devoted groom. He was a predator, and I would uncover his truth before he could sink his claws into Sarah. 6 months before the wedding, I'd hired Frank Romano, a private investigator whose name floated through Monterey's elite like a whispered legend. I'd found him through a discreet contact from Thomas's real estate days, a man who knew how to unearth secrets buried deep. Frank's office was a relic of another time, tucked above a dive bar in downtown Monterey, its walls lined with faded photographs and case files yellowed by years. The air smelled of cigarette ash and regret, but Frank's eyes were sharp, cutting through the haze like a lighthouse beam. Mrs. Sullivan. He'd said, his voice gravelly as he slid into a cracked leather chair. What makes you think this Brad Mitchell isn't who he claims to be? I leaned forward, my hands clasped tightly to steady the tremor of instinct. It's his eyes, Frank. They don't match his words. He talks of love, of loss, but he's sizing up my home like it's a prize to be claimed. Frank nodded, jotting notes on a legal pad. Mother's intuition, he said, not mocking, but acknowledging. Give me a week. If there's dirt, I'll find it. That week stretched into a month, each day a test of my patience as I played the doting mother to Sarah's glowing romance. When Frank called me back, his tone was heavier, laced with something I couldn't yet name, caution, perhaps, or dread. I returned to his office on a foggy evening, the kind where the mist clings to your skin like a secret. Frank was waiting, a thick manila folder on his desk, its edges frayed, as if it held a lifetime of sins. Your future son-in-law's real name is Brandon Michelson. He began, his voice low, deliberate. He's no widower, and that car accident story. A fabrication. My heart thudded, but I kept my face, still trained by years of boardroom negotiations. Go on, I said, my voice steady, despite the chill creeping up my spine. Frank opened the folder, revealing a web of deceit spun across years and states. Brandon Michelson has 3 previous marriages, all to wealthy widow's women like you, Mrs. Sullivan, with assets to tempt a saint. His first wife, Carmen Delgado, didn't die in a crash. She filed for divorce in Nevada 5 years ago, accusing him of siphoning funds from her business accounts. Then she vanished. No death certificate, no trace, just gone. He slid a grainy photocopy across the desk, a marriage license with Brandon's face younger, but unmistakable beside a woman with haunted eyes. The second wife in Oregon lost her retirement savings to an investment he pitched. Charges were filed, then dropped when she refused to testify. The third, a socialite in Phoenix, nearly died poisoning, ruled accidental, but her children swore it was him. I stared at the documents, each page a brick in the wall of Brad's lies. Credit card fraud in Miami, embezzlement in Seattle, a trail of aliases. Brandon, Michelson, Brian Matthews, Bradley, Monroe. He reinvented himself like a snake shedding skin, moving from city to city, preying on vulnerability. How does he do it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Frank leaned back his chair, creaking. He studies his targets, learns their weaknesses, their dreams. He becomes exactly what they need: a lover, a savior, a partner. Your daughter, Sarah. She's not his first mark, and unless someone stops him, she won't be his last. The words landed like a blow, but they also ignited something within me, a resolve as unyielding as the cliffs outside my home. Sarah was my heart, my legacy, and I would not let this man steal her future. But telling her was impossible. She was lost in Brad's spell, her eyes shining with a love that blinded her to his shadows. If I showed her this file, she'd accuse me of jealousy, of sabotaging her happiness. No, I had to protect her in silence, to move through this chess game with the precision of a queen guarding her board. Why hasn't he been caught? I asked, flipping through pages of dropped charges and missing witnesses. Frank's jaw tightened. He's careful, never leaves hard evidence. Witnesses disappear, or they're too embarrassed to pursue justice. He's a ghost, Margaret slipping through cracks in the system. He tapped a photograph of Brad Brandon laughing at a gala, his arm around a silver-haired woman whose smile didn't reach her eyes. But ghosts leave traces. I found these because I know where to look. The question is, what do you want to do with this? I didn't answer immediately. The ocean's rhythm pulsed through the open window, a reminder of time's relentless march. I thought of Sarah, her laughter at the dinner table, her hand in Brad's, her dreams of a life by the sea. I thought of Thomas, who'd built our empire with sweat and cunning, who'd trusted me to guard it after he was gone. And I thought of myself, not the grieving widow others saw, but the woman who'd negotiated deals beside her husband, who'd learned to read men like Brad long before he crossed my threshold. I want to know everything I said, finally, my voice firm. Every alias, every bank account, every move he's made. And I want a plan to stop him. Frank raised an eyebrow, a flicker of respect in his gaze. That's a dangerous game, Mrs. Sullivan. Men like Brandon don't take kindly to being cornered. I met his eyes, my own blazing with a fire I hadn't felt in years. Neither do I. Over the next few weeks, Frank dug deeper, unearthing fragments of Brandon's life that painted a portrait of calculated chaos. A burner phone traced to a Miami motel, a shell company in the Caymans linked to one of his aliases, a cryptic email exchange with an unknown contact hinting at a big score in California. Each piece was a thread in a tapestry of deception, but none was enough to bring him down. Not yet. I kept the file locked in a safe beneath Thomas's desk, its weight a constant reminder of the battle ahead. The wedding came and went, a blur of white lace and hollow vows. I watched Brad pledge his love to Sarah, his words polished to perfection, and felt a pang, not of doubt, but of certainty. He was playing a long game, one that would end with my daughter's heart broken and my legacy in his hands. But I was playing too, and I had an advantage. He didn't suspect I knew who he was, and I was no one's prey. As I stood on the cliffside that night, the sea spray kissing my face, I felt a shift within me. The grief that had anchored me since Thomas's death was giving way to something sharper, something alive. I was Margaret Sullivan, guardian of an empire, protector of my daughter, and I would unravel Brad's secrets before he could unravel us. The ocean whispered its approval, its voice a promise of storms to come. I turned back to the house, the file's contents burning in my mind, and prepared for the next move in a game where only one of us could win. The Monterey dawn broke in shades of amber, painting the ocean with a deceptive calm that mirrored the storm brewing in my heart. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's wedding, 3 weeks since I'd held Frank Romano's file in my hands, its pages a map of Brad Mitchell's, or rather, Brandon Michelson's deceptions. I'd kept my silence a fortress around the $30 million empire of beachfront properties Thomas left me, but I knew the predator circling my daughter would strike soon. When the doorbell chimed that morning, sharp and insistent, like a blade slicing through fog, I felt it the moment had arrived. Brad was coming for what he thought was his. I opened the door to find him standing on my porch, his smile as polished as the leather briefcase in his hand. Beside him was a man in a tailored charcoal suit, his face all sharp angles and practiced neutrality. Margaret Brad said, his voice smooth as the tide. "This is Robert Kane, my attorney. We need to discuss your family's future." His words were a velvet glove over a steel fist, and I felt the weight of his intent settle over me like a shadow. I invited them in my movements, deliberate, as if each step were part of a ritual to summon my own strength. The living room, with its soaring windows and view of the crashing Pacific, became our stage, and I was ready to play my part. I served coffee in my finest bone china, the clink of cups, a counterpoint to the tension coiling in the air. Brad sat across from me on the cream leather sofa, his posture relaxed, but his eyes glinting with purpose like a hawk sizing up its prey. Kane perched beside him, his briefcase open, a stack of documents at the ready. As Sarah's husband, Brad, began leaning forward, "I'm entitled to understand our family's financial position. California's a community property state, after all." His tone was earnest, almost paternal, but I caught the flicker of calculation in his gaze, the way his fingers brushed the edge of his briefcase as if it held the key to my empire. I sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch a weapon I'd honed over years of navigating Thomas's world of high-stakes deals. The properties were left to me alone. I said, my voice calm but edged with iron. "Not to Sarah." The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through Brad's composure. His smile tightened a crack in the facade, but he recovered quickly. "Of course, Margaret," he said. "But as part of the family now, I want to ensure Sarah's future, and yours is secure." Kane cleared his throat, his fingers sliding a document across the glass coffee table with the precision of a surgeon. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, his voice clipped, "while your inheritance is technically separate, we believe there are grounds for a more equitable arrangement." Equitable. The word hung in the air, audacious and obscene, as if my life's work with Thomas could be carved up like a holiday roast. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto Kane's. What kind of arrangement, I asked, my tone neutral, masking the fire igniting within me. Kane's lips curved into a thin smile, as if he sensed an opening. "A family trust," he said, tapping the document. "You'd retain control during your lifetime, ensuring your financial security, but it would facilitate a smooth succession to Sarah and Brad as her husband." He spoke with the confidence of a man accustomed to compliance, but I was no stranger to men like him. I picked up the papers, scanning them with the scrutiny Thomas had taught me, my fingers tracing lines of legal jargon that hid a venomous intent. Buried in the fine print was a clause that chilled my blood. If I were deemed incapacitated, Brad would gain power of attorney over the trust, effectively handing him the keys to my 30 million empire. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression serene, a mask forged in boardrooms and battles. "This is quite comprehensive," I said, folding the document with deliberate care. "I'll need time to review it with my attorney." Brad's smile faltered, a muscle twitching near his jaw, betraying a flicker of frustration. "Of course, Margaret," he said, his voice still honeyed but strained. "But family should trust. Family, don't you think? These properties are Sarah's inheritance, too. Shouldn't she have some security? The audacity of it was breathtaking. He was using my love for Sarah as a weapon, twisting her future into a lever to pry open my fortune. I leaned back, my coffee cup warm in my hands, and studied him. His blue eyes, so convincing in their sincerity, held a glint of something darker, greed, perhaps, or something more sinister. Frank's file flashed in my mind. Brandon Michelson, 3 marriages, vanished, wives dropped charges. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, about bending my world to his will. I see, I said, my voice soft, but laced with steel. And what exactly are you proposing? Kane jumped in his tone and smooth as polished marble. A trust that protects your assets while providing for Sarah and Brad's future family. Children. Mrs. Sullivan needs stability. This ensures their inheritance is secure. Children. The word was a calculated strike meant to tug at my heart, but it only sharpened my resolve. Brad had been married to Sarah for 28 days, and already he was laying claim to a legacy that wasn't his. I set down my cup, the clink echoing in the quiet room. A trust is an interesting idea, I said, my eyes never leaving Brad's. But I'd need transparency, a complete financial disclosure from both of you, assets, debts, income history for the past 5 years. If we're to be family partners, everything should be out in the open. The words were a trap sprung with the precision of a hunter. I knew Brandon Michelson's history. Fraud, embezzlement, a trail of aliases would unravel under scrutiny. Brad's face remained composed, but a muscle near his eye twitched, a telltale sign of a man cornered. That seems invasive, Brad said, his voice tightening, the charm slipping like a mask. What does my financial history have to do with your estate planning? I smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips. Everything, I replied. If you're to manage assets worth $30 million, I need to know you're capable. After all, Thomas built this empire with discipline and trust. I owe it to him to be thorough. The room fell silent. The only sound, the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. Kane shifted uncomfortably, his fingers hovering over his briefcase, as if searching for a lifeline. Brad's gaze bored into mine, searching for weakness, but I met it with the unyielding strength of a woman who'd faced down worse threats than him. I think we need to table this discussion, Brad said, finally, his voice clipped. You're obviously feeling overwhelmed, Margaret. Why don't you take a few weeks to think it over? Oh, I'm not overwhelmed, I said, rising to signal the meeting's end. My tone bright, but edged with defiance. In fact, I'm energized. This is the most interest anyone's shown in my affairs since Thomas died. I'll have my attorney draw up some questions for that financial disclosure. Standard due diligence, you understand. I escorted them to the door, my heart racing but my steps steady, the weight of Frank's file a silent ally in my safe. As their car disappeared down the coastal road, I stood by the window, the ocean's rhythm a mirror to my resolve. Brad thought he was playing me, but he had no idea he'd walked into my web. I poured myself a glass of Pinot Noir, the liquid catching the sunlight like blood, and dialed Frank's number. They took the bait, I said when he answered. Brad's rattled. He can't risk a background check. Frank's voice was gruff, approving. Good. He'll either run or double down. Either way, we're ready. I hung up, staring at the horizon where sea met sky, a line as blurred as the truth I was chasing. Brad wasn't just a con man. He was a phantom, a man who thrived in the shadows of trust. But I was no stranger to shadows myself. I'd built this empire beside Thomas learned to read men like Brad to anticipate their moves. The game was far from over, and I was playing to win not just for my wealth, but for Sarah's future and for the strength I'd rediscovered within myself. The ocean outside my Monterey home churned restlessly that night. its waves a restless murmur that mirrored the unease coiling in my chest. I stood by the window, the glass cool against my fingertips, replaying the confrontation with Brad and his lawyer, Robert Kane. My demand for a financial disclosure had been a calculated strike, a move to expose the cracks in Brad's carefully crafted facade as Brandon Michelson the Phantom who preyed on wealth and trust. I knew he couldn't comply, not with his history of fraud and aliases lurking in the shadows of Frank Romano's file. But as the stars glittered above the Pacific, I felt a prickle of dread. Men like Brad didn't retreat quietly. They struck back, or they vanished, like smoke. 3 days later, my phone rang, shattering the pre-dawn silence. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and her voice when I answered was a broken thing, trembling with sobs. "Mom, he's gone," she gasped. "Brad left. He said he needed space to think about our future. He took everything, his clothes, his car, and just disappeared." My heart clenched, not from surprise, but from the pain in her voice, raw and jagged like a wound. "I'm coming over," I said, already grabbing my keys. The drive to Sarah's apartment in Carmel was a blur, the coastal road cloaked in fog that seemed to carry secrets of its own. I felt the weight of Frank's file locked in my safe, its truths a burden I wasn't ready to share. When I arrived, Sarah was curled on her couch, a tissue box clutched like a lifeline, her face pale and streaked with tears. The apartment, once vibrant with her laughter, felt hollow, as if Brad had stolen its warmth along with his belongings. "I don't understand," she sobbed as I sat beside her, stroking her hair the way I had when she was a child plagued by nightmares. Everything was perfect. We were so happy. Why would he leave without even talking to me? Her words were a plea, but they carried a weight I recognized, denial clinging to the illusion of love Brad had spun around her. I wanted to tell her everything, to lay Frank's file at her feet and expose Brad as Brandon Michelson, the man who'd married and betrayed 3 wealthy widows before her. But her eyes, red-rimmed and searching, stopped me. She wasn't ready for the truth, not when her heart was shattered. "Sometimes people aren't who we think they are, sweetheart," I said gently, my voice steady despite the storm within. "He said I was the best thing that ever happened to him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He said he loved me." "I'm sure you were," I replied, choosing my words with care. "But sometimes people love the idea of someone more than the actual person." Sarah pulled back, her gaze sharpening as it met mine. "You know something, don't you? About Brad?" The question hung between us, heavy with the weight of what I had hidden. I'd dreaded this moment, the one where I'd have to peel back the veil and show her the monster she'd married. But I couldn't lie. Not now, not when her trust in me was all that held us together. I hired a private investigator. I admitted, my voice low, as if the walls themselves might betray us. Something about Brad didn't feel right from the beginning. I needed to know who he was. Sarah's eyes widened, a flash of betrayal cutting through her grief. "Mom, how could you? That's such a violation of privacy." Her words stung, but I pressed on, knowing the truth was the only way to save her. "Sarah, his real name is Brandon Michelson. He's been married 3 times before, always to women with money. His first wife didn't die in a car accident. She disappeared after accusing him of theft." The air in the room grew thick, Sarah's breath hitching as she processed my words. I watched her face, searching for the moment she'd see the truth, but instead, her expression hardened. "I can't believe you did this," she whispered, her voice trembling with anger. "I can't believe you drove away the man I love with your paranoid suspicions." The accusation was a blade slicing through the bond we'd always shared. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away, curling tighter into herself. "Sarah, "I'm trying to protect you," I said. But the words felt hollow against her pain. She stood pacing the small living room, her movements frantic as if she could outrun the truth. "You don't get it, Mom. He loved me. We had plans, children, a home by the sea. And now he's gone because you couldn't trust him." Her voice rose cracking with desperation. I wanted to shake her to make her see the file's damning evidence, but I knew it would only push her further away. Instead, I stood my own resolve hardening. "I hope you're right," I said softly. "But if you're wrong, I'll be here when you need me." I left her apartment, the door closing behind me, with a finality that echoed in my bones. The drive back to Monterey was a descent into silence, the fog thickening around me like a shroud. For 3 weeks, Sarah shut me out. My calls went to voicemail, my texts unanswered. My drives past her apartment met with the sight of her car, but no response at the door. Each day, the silence grew heavier, a reminder of the cost of my secrecy. I'd protected her from Brad's truth, but in doing so, I'd lost her trust. In those weeks, I leaned on Frank Romano, his gruff updates my only tether to the unfolding mystery. "Brad's gone to ground," he told me over a crackling phone line. I tracked him to Phoenix, but the trail's cold. He's good at disappearing Margaret. Give him 6 months, he'll surface with a new name, a new mark. The words chilled me, not just for Sarah, but for the next woman who'd fall into Brad's web. I sat in my study, Frank's file open before me, its pages a litany of Brandon's sins, fraud, embezzlement, vanished wives. But it was the gaps that haunted me, the missing pieces of his plan. Why Sarah? Why now? And what had he left behind in his haste to flee? One evening, as the sun bled crimson into the ocean, I found a clue, a small, overlooked detail in Frank's file. A receipt from a Monterey coffee shop dated months before Sarah met Brad, tucked into a folder of miscellaneous expenses. It was innocuous, a $4 latte, but the date and location gnawed at me. Sarah had mentioned meeting Brad at a coffee shop near her office, a chance encounter that sparked their romance. But what if it wasn't chance? What if Brad had been watching her, studying her long before that first smile? The thought sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but of clarity. He'd chosen Sarah because of me, because of the 30 million empire I guarded. She wasn't just his mark, she was his key. I poured myself a glass of wine, the ruby liquid catching the lamplight, and felt a shift within me. The grief that had anchored me since Thomas's death was giving way to a fierce determination. I wasn't just a widow, a mother, a keeper of wealth. I was a woman who'd faced down boardrooms and built an empire beside her husband. Brad thought he could outmaneuver me, but he'd underestimated the strength forged in loss and love. I dialed Frank again. "He's not done with us," I said, my voice steady. "He'll come back. Men like him don't walk away from $30 million. Frank's silence was heavy then. "You're right. But be careful, Margaret. He knows you're on to him now. That makes him dangerous." I hung up, staring at the ocean, its waves, a promise of battles to come. Sarah's heartbreak was a wound I couldn't heal, not yet. But I would protect her, even if it meant facing the darkness alone. Brad's departure wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a game where my strength, my secrets, and my silence would be my greatest weapons. The Monterey dawn was a fragile thing, its pale light barely piercing the fog that clung to my cliffside home like a shroud. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's tearful call, 3 weeks of silence that cut deeper than any blade. My daughter, my heart had shut me out, blaming me for Brad's disappearance, for shattering the illusion of love she'd clung to so fiercely. I stood in my study, Frank Romano's file open on Thomas's old desk, its pages a grim reminder of the predator who'd slipped through our fingers. Brandon Michelson. Brad Mitchell was out there, a ghost weaving new lies, and I feared for the next woman who'd fall into his trap. But more than that, I feared for Sarah, whose heartbreak had blinded her to the truth I'd tried to share. The doorbell rang sharp and unexpected, pulling me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Sarah standing on my porch, but she was a shadow of the vibrant woman who'd danced at her wedding. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, as if grief had carved away pieces of her soul. She'd lost weight, her frame swallowed by an oversized sweater, and her hair hung limp, untouched by the care she once took. "Sarah," I gasped, flinging open the door. "Sweetheart, come in." She moved past me like a specter, settling onto the couch where Brad had sat, weeks before his briefcase, a weapon of ambition. The coincidence chilled me, as if his presence lingered in the room. "I need to know everything," Sarah said without preamble, her voice low but steady, a spark of steel beneath the fragility. "About Brad. About what you found out." My heart ached at the sight of her, broken yet defiant, and I knew this was the moment I'd both dreaded and hoped for. "Honey, are you sure?" I asked, sitting beside her, my hand hovering over hers. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the ocean beyond the window, as if drawing strength from its restless churn. "I need to understand what I married." I retrieved Frank's file from my study, its weight heavier than ever, as I placed it before her. For the next 2 hours, I guided Sarah through the labyrinth of Brad's lies, each revelation a stone dropped into the still waters of her grief. "His real name is Brandon Michelson." I began opening the folder to a photograph of a younger Brad, his smile as sharp as a blade. 3 previous marriages, all to wealthy widows. His first wife, Carmen Delgado, didn't die in a car accident. She vanished after accusing him of stealing from her business accounts. Sarah's breath hitched, but she leaned closer, her fingers tracing the edges of a photocopied divorce filing. I continued, my voice steady, but soft as if cushioning the blows. "In Oregon, an elderly woman lost her retirement savings to an investment scheme he orchestrated. Charges were filed, then dropped when she refused to testify. In Phoenix, a socialite nearly died poisoning ruled accidental, but her children pointed to him." I showed her the documents, bank records, aliases, a cryptic email hinting at a California score. Sarah's eyes widened as she read, her hands trembling, but her jaw set. "He's escalating," I said gently. "Each marriage, the stakes get higher, the methods get darker." Sarah stared at a surveillance photo of Brad entering a Las Vegas hotel with a woman whose face was obscured, her posture tense. Another showed him at an ATM withdrawing cash from an account that wasn't his. "The man I married doesn't exist," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "No, sweetheart," I said, my hand finally finding hers. "He doesn't. But you're still here, and you're stronger than he knows." She pulled away, standing to pace the room, her movements restless but purposeful. I felt so connected to him, she said, her voice cracking. He knew exactly what to say, how to make me feel seen. How could someone fake that I chose my words carefully, knowing this was her moment of reckoning? Because that's his skill, Sarah. He studies women, learns their dreams, their vulnerabilities. He becomes their perfect mirror. You weren't naive. You were targeted by a master. Sarah stopped, her gaze locking onto mine, and I saw something shift, a spark of rage igniting behind her grief. "I told him about Dad's properties," she said, suddenly, her voice barely audible. "On our 3rd date. He was talking about his dream of living by the ocean, and I mentioned your beachfront empire. I thought I was sharing our future." The admission hit me like a wave, confirming the suspicion I'd uncovered in Frank's file. Brad hadn't stumbled into Sarah's life. He'd chosen her a key to unlock my $30 million legacy. "Where did you meet him?" I asked, my voice calm but my mind racing. At the coffee shop near my office, she said, her brow furrowing. He was there every morning reading the financial section. We started talking about investments, real estate trends. He complimented my portfolio analysis. I was grading papers for my economics class. I nodded, the pieces clicking into place. Frank had mentioned Brad's methodical research, his habit of stalking targets long before contact. That coffee shop wasn't a coincidence. It was a stage, and Sarah had been his unwitting star. He played a long game. I said, my tone steady, but laced with steel. He knew who you were before that first cup of coffee. He knew about me, about the properties. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. Instead, she straightened, her voice hardening. Mom, I want him to pay. Not just for me, but for those other women, for what he'll do to the next one if we don't stop him. Her words were a spark igniting a fire within me. My daughter, broken but unbowed, was ready to fight. Honey, the police have been chasing him for years, I cautioned. They can't catch him without evidence. Sarah's gaze didn't waver. Then we give them evidence. He texted me this morning. She pulled out her phone, showing me a message that sent a chill down my spine. Sarah, I have made a terrible mistake. I love you more than life. I'm getting help for my commitment issues. Please give me another chance. I'll explain everything. Brad. He's not done. Sarah said, her voice steady now. He didn't get the properties. Men like him don't walk away from $30 million. She was right, and in that moment I saw Thomas in her, the stubborn resolve that had built our empire. You want to set a trap? I asked, my heart pounding with both pride and fear. Sarah nodded, her eyes blazing. I want to give him what he thinks he wants, and then I want to destroy him. We drove to Frank Romano's office that afternoon, the fog still clinging to Monterey's streets like a conspirator. Frank's office was as gritty as ever, the air thick with the scent of old files and stale coffee. He listened as Sarah laid out her plan, her voice steady, but her hands clenched. I'll text him back, say, I forgive him, that I want him back. I'll tell him you feel guilty for driving him away. Mom, and you're ready to move forward with the trust. I nodded, my mind racing with the risks. I'll play the remorseful mother, I said, eager to make amends to secure Sarah's future. Frank shook his head, his eyes narrowing. This is dangerous, ladies. Brandon Michelson's a sociopath, maybe worse. You're talking about luring a man who might have killed before. Sarah leaned forward, her voice fierce. Every day he's free, he's hunting. Another woman will go through what I did, or worse. We can't wait for the police. Frank studied her, a flicker of respect in his gaze. You've changed, Sarah. A month ago, you were defending him. Now you want him in prison. A month ago, I thought I knew him. She said, her voice like steel. Now I know what he is. I felt a surge of pride tempered by fear. My daughter was no longer the naive girl who'd fallen for Brad's lies. She was a warrior, forged in betrayal, and I would stand beside her. We spent the next hour refining the plan. Sarah would respond to Brad's text, her words dripping with forgiveness and longing, luring him back to Carmel. I would play the guilt-ridden mother ready to sign over the trust to restore family harmony. Frank outlined the key. We need him to commit fraud on record. Sarah, you'll wear a wire. Every word he says needs to be admissible. Sarah nodded without hesitation. I'll do it. Frank's voice grew stern. Sarah, you'll have to convince a sociopath you still love him, let him touch you, manipulate you all while knowing what he's done. Are you ready for that? She paused, staring out Frank's grimy window at the city below, her face a mask of resolve. When I was 12, Mom told me bullies win when good people do nothing. I'm done doing nothing. Her words echoed Thomas's, a reminder of the strength we'd built together. Frank sighed, relenting. All right, but we do this my way. Surveillance outside Sarah's apartment, safety protocols in place. If it feels dangerous, we abort. As we left his office, the fog parted, revealing a sliver of sunlight. I looked at Sarah, her jaw set, her eyes burning with purpose. The trap was set, but the ocean's restless churn whispered a warning. Brad was no ordinary prey, and this game could cost us everything. The fog clung to Carmel's streets like a conspirator. As I sat in my car a block from Sarah's apartment, the hum of Frank Romano's surveillance van, a faint pulse in my earpiece. It was dusk, the sky bruised with purples and grays, and my heart pounded with a rhythm that matched the ocean's restless churn. Sarah had texted Brad 2 days ago, her words carefully crafted to lure him back. I miss you. Mom feels terrible for doubting you. Let's fix this together. His response had come within hours, dripping with false remorse. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I love you. Let's meet and make things right. Now, as the trap we'd set was about to spring, I felt a mix of pride and dread. Pride for my daughter's courage, dread for the predator we were baiting. Sarah was inside her apartment, a wire hidden beneath her blouse, her every word monitored by Frank and his team. I'd agreed to play the remorseful mother, ready to sign over the family trust to secure Sarah's happiness. But the role felt like a tightrope walk over a chasm. Brad Brandon. Michelson was no ordinary conman. Frank's file painted him as a chameleon, a man who'd outwitted police and vanished wives with chilling precision. As I gripped the steering wheel, the weight of his history pressed against me. Fraud, embezzlement, a woman poisoned, another vanished. What if he sensed the trap? What if he hurt Sarah before we could stop him? The earpiece crackled, and Frank's gravelly voice cut through. He's approaching the building, black jacket carrying a briefcase. Stay sharp, Margaret. I nodded, though he couldn't see me, my eyes fixed on the street where a figure emerged from the fog. Brad moved with the grace of a predator, his steps deliberate, his smile a blade sheathed in charm. He knocked on Sarah's door, and my breath caught as her voice came through the earpiece, soft but steady. Brad. You came. She said the words laced with a vulnerability I knew was an act. I've missed you so much. I listened as they spoke, Sarah's apartment a stage for a deadly performance. I was a fool to leave. Brad said, his voice smooth as silk. I got scared, Sarah. Your mother's suspicions, the pressure, it overwhelmed me. But I'm here now, and I want us to build a life together. The sincerity in his tone was flawless, a masterpiece of deception that made my skin crawl. Sarah played her part, her voice trembling just enough to seem genuine. I want that too. Mom's ready to make things right. She's been talking about a trust to secure our future. My cue was approaching, but I lingered in the car, letting the scene unfold, my fingers tracing the edge of a photograph from Frank's file, a grainy image of Brad with a woman whose face was half hidden, taken months before he met Sarah. The timing gnawed at me, a reminder of his calculated hunt. Stay focused, Margaret, Frank's voice hissed in my ear. He's steering the conversation to the money. I tuned back in, hearing Brad's voice shift a subtle edge beneath the warmth. A trust is a great idea, he said. It protects your mom's assets. Malibu, Carmel, Monterey, and ensures you and our future kids are taken care of. I've been researching management companies. There's one in San Francisco, Pinnacle Partners, that could handle everything. Tax advantages, streamlined succession. The mention of Pinnacle Partners sent a jolt through me. Frank's file had referenced a shell company in the Caymans linked to one of Brad's aliases. Was Pinnacle another front? I whispered into the earpiece. Frank, check Pinnacle Partners. It's not random. His response was immediate. On it. Keep him talking, Sarah. Sarah's voice remained steady, her acting impeccable. That sounds smart, Brad. Mom's been so stressed about managing the properties. Maybe you could talk to her about it. She was reeling him in, her words a lure. But I caught a tremor in her tone, a flicker of fear beneath the facade. Brad's response was careful, almost too careful. I'd love to help your mom, he said. Pinnacle's top tier. They'd appoint a trustee, someone neutral to oversee the properties. It'd take the burden off her. His words were polished, legal sounding, but I sensed a trap within our trap. He wasn't committing to fraud, not explicitly. Every phrase was a step in a dance avoiding the snare we'd set. He's slippery, Frank muttered. He knows how to talk without incriminating himself. Push him, Sarah. I couldn't stay in the car any longer. My role was to join the conversation to play the guilt-ridden mother eager to sign over the trust. I stepped out the fog, wrapping around me like a cloak, and walked to Sarah's apartment. The door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. Inside, Brad sat on the couch, his briefcase open papers neatly arranged. Sarah stood by the window, her posture tense, her eyes meeting mine with a silent plea. Mom. She said, her voice warm but strained. Brad's here. He's got some great ideas for the properties. I nodded, slipping into my role with the ease of a woman who'd faced down boardrooms. Brad, I owe you an apology. I said, my voice soft but deliberate. I was wrong to question you. Sarah's happiness means everything to me, and I want to make this right. His smile widened, but his eyes narrowed. A predator assessing a new player. Margaret. I appreciate that, he said. I know this hasn't been easy. Let's work together to secure your family's legacy. He slid a document across the coffee table, its pages crisp and official, bearing the Pinnacle Partners logo. This is a preliminary trust agreement, he said. It outlines how Pinnacle would manage the property's reduced tax liabilities and ensure Sarah's future. You'd retain control, of course, but it simplifies things for everyone. I scanned the document, my heart racing, but my face serene. The language was dense, but I caught phrases designed to obscure delegated authority, third-party oversight, flexible asset allocation. It was a maze crafted to hide his intent control over my $30 million empire. Very thorough. I said, my tone neutral as I flipped through the pages, but I'd need to see Pinnacle's credentials, their financials, their track record. Brad's smile tightened, a muscle twitching near his jaw, a tell I had noticed before. Of course, he said, his voice smooth but strained. I can arrange a meeting with their team. They're based in San Francisco, very discreet. Discreet. The word hung in the air, a red flag in a sea of fog. Sarah stepped closer, her hand brushing mine, a signal to keep pushing. Brad. You've thought of everything she said, her voice adoring, but her eyes sharp. Tell me more about how this helps our kids. The question was a masterstroke designed to draw him out, but Brad sidestepped it with chilling precision. It's about stability, he said, his gaze flicking between us. A legacy for our family protected from market fluctuations. His words were vague, defensible, and I felt a chill, not from fear, but from the realization that he suspected the wire. He was too careful, too controlled, as if he knew we were listening. He's onto us, I whispered into the earpiece, my voice barely audible. Frank's response was grim. Keep him there. We need something concrete. The room grew smaller, the air thick with unspoken threats. I leaned forward, my voice warm, but edged with steel. Brad, I'm ready to move forward, but I need guarantees. A full audit of Pinnacle and your financial history. Transparency is the foundation of trust, isn't it? His eyes locked onto mine. A flicker of something dark, Anger, perhaps, or calculation. Transparency works both ways, Margaret. He said, his tone soft but laced with menace. You've been cautious, too. Any secrets you're keeping? The question was a dart aimed at my heart. Did he know about Frank? About the file? I smiled, my composure unshaken. Only the kind a mother keeps to protect her daughter, I said, holding his gaze. Sarah's hand tightened on mine. Her courage, a mirror to my own. But Brad's smile returned sharper now, a blade unsheathed. Fair enough, he said, standing abruptly. Let's take this one step at a time. I'll get those documents for you. Sarah, walk me out. She hesitated, her eyes meeting mine, and I nodded slightly. She followed him to the door, her wires still recording, but my heart pounded with a new fear. His sudden exit felt wrong, too, calculated. As the door closed behind them, Frank's voice crackled in my ear. He's spooked. We didn't get enough. He's too good at this. I rushed to the window, watching Brad disappear into the fog, his briefcase swinging like a pendulum. Sarah returned, her face pale but resolute. He kissed me, she whispered, her voice shaking. He said he'd be back tomorrow with the paperwork. But Mom, his eyes, they were so cold. I pulled her close, her trembling frame a reminder of the stakes. You were incredible, I said, my voice steady despite the storm within. But he knows something's up. We need to be ready for what he does next. Frank's van pulled up minutes later, and we piled in the monitors, flickering with footage of Brad's departure. Pinnacle Partners is a ghost. Frank said, his voice grim. No records, no office. It's a front, just like I thought. The confirmation was a weight, but also a spark. Brad was slipping, and we were closing in. As we drove back to Monterey, the ocean's roar followed us, a reminder of the battle ahead. Sarah's hand found mine, her grip fierce. We'll get him, she said, her voice a vow. I nodded, my resolve hardening. Brad thought he could outmaneuver us, but he'd underestimated the strength of a mother and daughter united. The trap hadn't caught him yet, but the game was far from over, and I was playing with a fire he couldn't extinguish. The fog had lifted from Carmel's streets, but a heavier weight settled over me as I sat in Frank Romano's surveillance van, the monitors flickering with static. The trap we'd set for Brad Brandon Michelson had been meticulous. Sarah wearing a wire, playing the forgiving wife. Me, the remorseful mother, ready to sign over a trust to secure her happiness. But Brad's careful words, his evasive dance around our questions had left us empty-handed. His sudden exit from Sarah's apartment the previous night, his briefcase swinging like a pendulum, lingered in my mind like a warning. The ocean's distant roar, audible through the van's cracked window, seemed to mock our failure, its rhythm a reminder that time was slipping through our fingers. Frank leaned back in his chair, his face etched with frustration as he replayed the audio from Sarah's wire. He didn't bite. He said, his voice gruff. Every word was calculated, nothing admissible. He talked about stability and legacy, but never crossed into fraud. The guy's a ghost, Margaret. I stared at the monitor, frozen on an image of Brad's retreating figure, his silhouette swallowed by the fog. He knew I said, my voice low but certain. He suspected the wire. That's why he was so careful. Sarah, sitting beside me, her hands clasped tightly, nodded. His eyes, Mom, they were so cold, like he was looking right through me. The weight of her words pressed against my chest. My daughter, so brave in luring Brad back now, bore the scars of his manipulation. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed by the betrayal she'd faced, not just from Brad, but from the truth I'd kept from her for too long. We need to regroup, I said, my voice steady despite the storm within. He's not done with us. Men like him don't walk away from $30 million. Frank's eyes met mine. A flicker of respect mingled with concern. You're right, but we need hard evidence. The FBI's interested Agent Martinez is on board, but without a clear confession, their hands are tied. Before I could respond, Sarah's phone buzzed, the sound sharp in the van's cramped space. She glanced at the screen, her breath catching. "It's from him," she whispered, holding it up for us to see. The message was brief. Chilling Sarah. "I know you tried to trap me. This isn't over. Tell your mother to watch her back." My blood ran cold, not from fear, but from the audacity of his threat. He hadn't just slipped our trap, he'd turned it against us, leaving a warning that felt like a blade held to our throats. "We need to get you both somewhere safe," Frank said, his voice urgent. "If he's this bold, he's dangerous." I nodded, but my mind was racing, piecing together the fragments of Brad's game. The text wasn't just a threat. It was a message that he knew more than we'd realized. How had he suspected the wire? Had he seen Frank's van, or was there another player we hadn't accounted for? The Pinnacle Partners front, untraceable, as Frank had confirmed, hinted at a network beyond Brad's solo schemes. The thought sent a shiver through me, but it also ignited a fire. He'd underestimated us, and that was his mistake. We drove to Frank's office, a gritty sanctuary above Monterey's dive bars, the air thick with the scent of old files and stale coffee. Sarah sat on a worn couch, her knees drawn up, clutching a mug Frank had handed her. I stood by the window, the city's lights flickering through the fog like distant stars. Agent Martinez arrived, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, her badge glinting under the fluorescent light. "Mrs. Sullivan, Sarah," she said, settling into a chair. "I've listened to the recordings. They're clean." He didn't say anything we can use in court. No explicit intent to defraud, no direct threats until that text, and even that's too vague to act on. Sarah's mug trembled in her hands. "So he gets away with it?" she asked, her voice breaking. Martina's expression softened, but her words were firm. "Not necessarily. We're building a case, but we need more financial records. A witness, something concrete. Men like Brandon Michelson thrive in the gray areas of the law." I turned from the window, my resolve hardening. "Then we find something concrete," I said. "He's not a ghost. He's a man, and men make mistakes." Martinez raised an eyebrow, studying me. "You're determined, Mrs. Sullivan. But be careful. That text suggests he's not just running. He's angry, and that makes him unpredictable." I nodded, but her warning only fueled my fire. Brad had invaded my daughter's life, my home, my legacy. His threat wasn't a deterrent, it was a challenge, and I was no stranger to challenges. Back at my Monterey home, I pored over Frank's file again, searching for the mistake Martinez spoke of. The pages were a labyrinth of Brad's aliases. Brandon Michelson, Brian Matthews, Bradley Monroe, each tied to a city, a woman, a scheme. But one detail caught my eye, overlooked in our haste. A bank transferred $10,000 from an account linked to Brad's second wife to an offshore entity dated weeks before her charges were dropped. The entity's name was obscured, but its location, the Caymans, matched the Pinnacle Partners front. Was this the thread that could unravel his empire? I called Frank, my voice urgent. "Dig into that Cayman account again. There's a connection to Pinnacle, I'm sure of it." While Frank worked, Sarah stayed with me, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of our fractured bond. We sat by the fire, the ocean's roar a constant companion. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she said, her voice soft. "I thought you were trying to control me like Dad sometimes did." The admission stung, but it also opened a door. "I only wanted to protect you," I said, reaching for her hand. She squeezed it, her eyes glistening. "I know that now. But, Mom, I'm scared. What if he comes back? I pulled her close, her warmth grounding me. If he comes back, we'll be ready, I said. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. And so am I. Her nod was small, but it carried a resolve that mirrored my own. We weren't just victims of Brad's game. We were players now, and the board was ours to control. The next morning, Frank called with news that tightened the knot in my stomach. I traced the Cayman account, he said. It's linked to a network of shell companies, but there's a name, Vincent Rossi. He's a fixer known for cleaning up messes for high rollers. If Brad's working with him, this is bigger than we thought. The name sent a chill through me. A fixer meant resources connections, maybe even protection. Brad wasn't just a lone predator. He was a cog in a machine, and we'd rattled it. I stood on my deck, the ocean stretching before me, its waves a reminder of forces that could both destroy and renew. Brad's threat echoed in my mind. Tell your mother to watch her back. But I wasn't watching my back. I was watching the horizon where the next move would come. The trap had failed, but it had exposed Brad's anger, his vulnerability. He thought he could intimidate us, but he'd awakened something fiercer, a mother's love, a daughter's rage, and a strength forged in betrayal. As I turned back to the house, Sarah joined me, her face pale, but her eyes sharp. "What's next, Mom?" she asked, her voice steady. I smiled, a spark of defiance igniting within me. "We don't wait for him," I said. "We hunt him. He's made his move, and now it's ours." The ocean roared its approval, its voice a promise of storms to come. Brad thought he held the upper hand, but he'd forgotten one truth. A woman guarding her family is a force no shadow can outrun. The Monterey dawn broke in jagged streaks of gold. The ocean's roar, a restless pulse that echoed the turmoil within me. Brad's threatening text, Sarah. "I know you tried to trap me. This isn't over. Tell your mother to watch her back," hung like a specter over my cliffside home. Its words a chilling reminder of the predator we'd failed to ensnare. Our trap had backfired, the recordings too vague to pin him down. And now Sarah and I were marked, our every move shadowed by his unseen presence. I stood in my study, Frank Romano's file open on Thomas's old desk. Its pages, a labyrinth of Brandon Michelson's sins, fraud, vanished wives, a fixer named Vincent Rossi. Yet, despite the evidence, Brad remained a ghost slipping through the cracks of justice with infuriating ease. A week after the failed trap, my phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. I hesitated, my heart thudding before answering. Brad's voice, smooth and unnervingly calm, filled the line. "Margaret, we need to talk," he said, as if we were old friends catching up. "No lawyers, no games, just you and me at your Carmel property tomorrow. I have an offer, one you'll want to hear." My blood ran cold, not from fear, but from the audacity of his approach. He knew we'd tried to trap him, yet here he was, bold as ever, inviting me to meet on my own turf. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm within. "You don't have to trust me," he said, a hint of amusement in his tone. "But you'll want to hear this. It's about your future, not just Sarah's. Bring an open mind." The call ended before I could respond, leaving me staring at the ocean, its waves a mirror to my churning thoughts. Was this a trap, a desperate bid to salvage his scheme, or something else entirely? Frank's warning echoed. He's angry, and that makes him unpredictable. Yet something in Brad's voice, a calculated confidence, suggested he held a card we hadn't seen. I didn't tell Sarah. Her heart, still raw from Brad's betrayal, couldn't handle another twist, and our rift, though healing, was fragile. Instead, I called Frank, relaying the conversation. It's a risk, Margaret, he said, his voice gruff. But if he's reaching out, he's desperate, or he's got an ace up his sleeve. I'll have Agent Martinez on standby, discreet surveillance. Don't go alone. I agreed, but as I hung up, a spark ignited within me. Brad thought he could outmaneuver me, but I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was a woman who'd built an empire beside Thomas, who'd faced down threats and emerged stronger. This meeting was my chance to unravel his game. The next day, I drove to my Carmel property, a glass and stone masterpiece perched on a cliff, its windows reflecting the restless sea. The air was crisp, salted with ocean spray, and I felt a surge of power as I stepped inside the house, a fortress of my own making. Brad was waiting in the living room, his posture relaxed, a leather portfolio at his side. But he wasn't alone. A woman stood by the window, her silver hair catching the light, her posture regal despite her age. She turned as I entered, her eyes sharp and assessing, a faint smile playing on her lips. Mrs. Sullivan, Brad said, standing, "Meet Victoria Chen. She has a story you need to hear." Victoria Chen was not what I expected. At 75, she carried herself with the confidence of a woman who'd conquered boardrooms, her tailored blazer, and Harvard MBA pin, a testament to her stature. Her presence threw me off balance, a variable I hadn't anticipated. "Ms. Chen," I said, my voice calm but wary. "What brings you here?" She gestured to the sofa, inviting me to sit, as if this were her home, not mine. "Margaret, may I call you that?" She asked, her voice smooth but commanding. I nodded. Settling across from her, my eyes flicking to Brad, who watched with a predator's patience. "I know you think Brad's a con man." Victoria began, her tone matter of fact. "And I understand why. His past marriages, aliases, dropped charges, looks damning. But I'm here to tell you it's not the whole story." My heart pounded, but I kept my face serene, trained by years of masking my thoughts. "Go on," I said, echoing the words I'd used with Frank when this all began. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "I was his second wife in Oregon. Yes, I lost money, $500,000 in an investment he pitched. But I wasn't a victim. I went in with my eyes open, chasing high-risk, high-reward deals, and I made $1.2 million in the end." The revelation hit like a wave, disorienting and cold. Frank's file had painted Victoria as a mark, a widow swindled by Brad's charm. But here she was, claiming agency, not victimhood. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice steady but my mind racing. Victoria's smile was knowing, almost conspiratorial. "Because you're like me, Margaret. A woman who's built something extraordinary, only to have others, your family, your daughter, assume you're fragile, in need of protection. I know what that feels like. My children tried to control my finances, claiming I was too old to make decisions. Brad offered me a way out." I glanced at Brad, his expression unreadable, but his eyes glinting with something I couldn't name, triumph perhaps, or amusement. "What's your offer, Brad?" I asked, cutting through the haze. He leaned forward, his portfolio open to a sleek proposal, the Pinnacle Partners logo embossed on the cover. "A partnership," he said. "Not a trust, not a scam. A legitimate venture to double your wealth, $60 million in 5 years, high-yield investments, offshore accounts, the kind of deals only the bold can handle. Victoria's in, and she's proof it works." The audacity of it stole my breath. He wasn't just after my properties. He was pitching me as an equal, a player in his game. "You expect me to believe you're legitimate," I said, my voice laced with skepticism. "After everything, your aliases, your threats." Brad's smile didn't waver. "I've never killed anyone, Margaret. My marriages were partnerships consensual and calculated. The women knew the risks. Carmen left because she couldn't handle the game. I'm not a saint, but I'm not a monster. Victoria nodded, her voice firm. He's telling the truth. My children called him a predator, but they were the ones trying to lock me in a cage. Brad gave me freedom, and I profited. You could too. Her words struck a chord, stirring a memory of Thomas's colleagues dismissing me as the wife in boardrooms of Sarah's recent accusations that I was paranoid, incompetent. Was I protecting my legacy, or was I clinging to control, afraid to take risks? The room felt smaller, the ocean's roar louder, as doubt crept into my resolve. Victoria's story was a mirror reflecting my own struggle for autonomy, but Brad's threat lingered, a shadow that didn't align with his polished pitch. Why now, I asked, my eyes locked on his. Why reach out after threatening us? His smile faltered just for a moment. That was a mistake, he said. I was angry, felt betrayed by Sarah's trap. But I see potential in you, Margaret. You're not like the others. You're a strategist like me. The flattery was a lure, but I wasn't biting, not yet. I'll need time, I said, standing to signal the meeting's end. And full transparency. Financials references everything. Brad nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. You'll have it. But think about what you want, Margaret. Not what Sarah wants or what Thomas would have wanted. What you want. Victoria handed me her card, her smile warm but enigmatic. Call me if you want to talk. Woman to woman. As they left, the house felt emptier, the ocean's voice a restless whisper. I stood by the window, clutching Victoria's card, her words echoing, a woman who's built something extraordinary. Was Brad manipulating me, or was he offering a truth I hadn't dared to see? I called Frank, relaying the meeting, my voice steady, but my mind a storm. Pinnacle's still a ghost, he said. But I'm digging into Victoria Chen. If she's telling the truth, this changes things. If not, it's a deeper game. Agent Martinez, listening in, added, Be cautious, Margaret. He's playing on your emotions, your pride. That's his strength. That night, I sat in my study, the file open, Victoria's card beside it. Her story had shaken me, not because I believed Brad, but because it forced me to question myself. Was I holding onto the properties out of love for Sarah, or fear of losing control? The ocean's rhythm offered no answers, only a reminder of the tides that could both destroy and renew. Brad's offer was a gamble, a siren's call to a woman who'd spent years guarding her empire. But I was Margaret Sullivan, and I'd built my strength in the shadows of loss. Whatever his game, I'd play it on my terms. The Carmel house lingered in my mind like a half-remembered dream, its cliffside perch a sentinel overlooking the Pacific, where Victoria Chen's words had planted seeds of doubt that now bloomed into a thorny thicket. Brad's offer, a partnership to double my $30 million empire through high-yield ventures, echoed with a siren's allure, challenging everything I'd built my resolve upon. I'd driven back to Monterey under Agent Martinez's watchful eye, the FBI's unmarked car trailing like a shadow. But the real pursuit was within me, a war between caution and the intoxicating pull of autonomy. Victoria's story, her claim of empowerment through Brad's risky deals, had cracked open a door I'd long kept bolted. Was I truly protecting Sarah? Or was I shielding myself from the thrill of reclaiming my own life? Sarah was waiting in my driveway when I pulled up her car, parked haphazardly, its engine still ticking with residual heat. The sun hung low, casting her in a golden halo that belied the storm in her eyes. She burst from the car before I could even turn off the ignition, her face a mask of fury and fear. Mom, how could you? she demanded, her voice cracking like thunder over the waves. You went to meet him alone, without telling me. After everything we planned. Her words hit like salt in a fresh wound, and I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my heels, my heart aching at the betrayal etched on her features. Sarah, I had protection, I said, keeping my tone, even though my pulse raced. Agent Martinez was with me the whole time. Brad arranged the meeting, he called me directly. I had to go to understand what he's playing at. She advanced, her hands clenched at her sides, the wind whipping her hair like a banner of defiance. Understand, Mom. He's a criminal. We set a trap, and you just— What? Walked into his web. What if he'd hurt you? What if this is all part of some bigger scheme? Her eyes, so like Thomas's, fierce and unyielding, searched mine, pleading beneath the anger. I reached for her arm, but she pulled back, the rejection a sharper sting than Brad's threats. I'm not fragile, Sarah, I said, my voice rising despite myself. I'm not some helpless widow you need to shield. I built this life with your father, dealt with sharks in boardrooms, navigated betrayals that would break most people. I went because I had to know the truth for both of us. The words hung between us, heavy with the unspoken, our rift, born of my secrets now fracturing further under the weight of my choices. Sarah's laugh was bitter, laced with tears. She blinked away fiercely. The truth. Mom, the truth is, he manipulated you. That woman, Victoria. What if she's part of it? A plant, someone he paid to spin her story. You're grieving, you're lonely, and he's preying on that, just like he preyed on me. Her voice broke on the last word, and the raw pain in it sliced through me. She wasn't wrong. Brad was a master of doubt, planting seeds that twisted love into suspicion. But her words echoed Victoria's children, who'd labeled her incompetent, and Brad's own warning. What does that tell you about her character? I stepped closer, the ocean's salt spray mingling with the sting in my eyes. Lonely, grieving Sarah. I've been alone since your father died, and I've thrived. But you treat me like I'm brittle, like one wrong decision will shatter me. When did you start seeing me that way? As a bank account to protect rather than a woman who knows her own mind. The accusation slipped out sharper than I intended, but it was the truth we'd danced around. Sarah recoiled as if slapped, her face paling. That's not fair, she whispered. I'm trying to protect you from him, from losing everything Dad built. You're not thinking straight. You're not competent right now. The word landed like a blow, echoing the very doubts Victoria had voiced about her own family. Competent. As if my years of shrewd deals, my intuition that had saved us from ruin, more than once evaporated with Thomas's death. I felt a chasm open between us, wider than the Pacific crashing below. Not competent. I repeated, my voice quiet, but laced with steel. That's exactly what Victoria's children said to her. They locked her away from risks from life because they couldn't bear to see her choose for herself. Is that what you want for me, Sarah, to wrap me in cotton wool safe, but suffocating? Tears spilled down her cheeks, now unchecked, and she shook her head, her voice a fractured plea. Mom, please. I didn't mean it like that. I can't lose you, too. Brad's poison he gets in your head makes you doubt the people who love you. This partnership, it's a trap dressed up as freedom. He'll take everything, the properties, your security, and leave you broken, just like he left me. Her words were a torrent, raw with the echo of her own heartbreak, and for a moment I saw the girl she'd been, small and scared after Thomas's diagnosis, clinging to me as her anchor. I pulled her into an embrace, then her sobs muffled against my shoulder, the salt of her tears mingling with the sea air. I know you love me, I murmured, stroking her hair as I had when she was little. But love isn't control, sweetheart. It's trust. Trust that I can make my own choices, even the risky ones. Brad's offer. It terrifies me too. But what if it's real? What if Victoria's right and I have been letting fear of loss, of failure, dictate my life? She pulled back her eyes, searching mine wide with desperation. And if it's not real? If he destroys you? The question hung unanswered as Agent Martinez's car pulled into the driveway, her presence a stark reminder of the stakes. She stepped out, her notebook in hand, her expression neutral but probing. Mrs. Sullivan, we verified Victoria's story mostly. She did profit from those investments, and her testimony aligns with Brad's claims. No fraud charges stuck because she refused to press them. But that doesn't make him clean. Men like him exploit vulnerabilities, emotional and financial. Sarah turned to her hope flickering. See, it's manipulation. Mom, you can't go through with this. Martinez glanced between us, her voice measured. It's your call, Margaret. Legally, as a competent adult, you can partner with anyone you choose. The FBI can't stop you even if we advise against it. But think about the risks, not just money, but safety. Brad's text was a threat, and threats like that don't vanish. Her words were a lifeline Sarah grasped, but to me they were chains pulling me back to the safe harbor I'd outgrown. That night, Sarah stayed our dinner, a tense ritual of unspoken fears. She paced the living room, her arguments a whirlwind, Brad's history, the failed trap, the shadow of Vincent Rossi. We can fight him another way, she urged. Sue him, go public, anything but this. I listened, my heart aching, but my mind was adrift on the ocean's rhythm, weighing the scales of caution against the call of possibility. By midnight, as she slept fitfully on the guest room couch, I retreated to my study, Brad's business card on the desk. Its single phone number, a portal to the unknown. His text arrived at 11:47 p.m., precise as a ticking clock, Hong Kong tomorrow. Investment Summit. Join as partner, $60 potential. Midnight deadline. Your move. Hong Kong, the other side of the world, far from FBI eyes family, ties the ghosts of Monterey. The allure was intoxicating, a city of neon and secrets, where deals were struck in shadowed towers, and a woman like me could rewrite her story. But Sarah's words echoed. He'll destroy you. And yet Victoria's voice countered. You deserve to choose your own adventure. I sat there, the lamp's glow casting long shadows, and confronted the woman in the mirror across the room, older, yes, but with Thomas's fire in her eyes. When had I stopped being that woman? When Thomas died. When Sarah's protectiveness became a cage. The properties, my $30 million legacy, weren't just assets. They were chains binding me to a life of preservation over passion. Brad was dangerous, yes, but so was stagnation. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the keys, and felt a surge of power, the kind that had carried me through Thomas's empire building, through grief's long night. At 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before his deadline, I texted back, I'll be ready in the morning. The words sent a thrill through me, equal parts terror and triumph. But I wasn't reckless. I called my attorney a trusted ally from Thomas's days and dictated a power of attorney document granting Sarah full control of my affairs if anything happened. It's a precaution. I said, my voice steady. Not a surrender. He promised to have it ready by dawn, his concern evident but unspoken. As I hung up, I glanced at Sarah's door, the soft rhythm of her breathing, a reminder of what I risked. Not just money, but her trust, perhaps irreparably. Dawn crept in gray and hesitant as a black sedan arrived, sleek and anonymous. Brad was in the passenger seat, elegant in a tailored suit, his smile genuine for the first time, a partner's grin, not a predator's. Margaret, he said, extending a hand as I slid in beside him. You're braver than I thought. I met his gaze, my own unyielding. I'm not brave, Brad. I'm done letting others decide my risks. Drive to the airport. We have a plane to catch. As we pulled away, Monterey receding in the rear view, I thought of Sarah waking to my note, I'm taking a chance on myself. Trust me as I trust you. The power of attorney is in the safe use it if you must. I love you. Her reaction would be fury, then fear, then perhaps understanding. Agent Martinez would fume. Frank would curse my recklessness, but they couldn't stop a woman reclaiming her sails. The ocean blurred into the horizon, a vast canvas of possibility, and for the first time since Thomas's death, I felt truly alive, untethered, unafraid, ready to chase the storm. The flight to Hong Kong was a blur of champagne and strategy, Brad outlining deals with the precision of a surgeon offshore funds. Tech startups in Shenzhen, real estate flips in Macau. His knowledge was intoxicating, a match for my instincts, and Victoria's reference checked out her portfolio had indeed doubled under his guidance. But doubts lingered whispers in the cabin's hum. Was this redemption or ruin? By the time we touched down in the neon-drenched sprawl of Hong Kong, I'd silenced them, my resolve a shield forged in fire. 3 months later, I returned to Monterey with a tan from Thai beaches and a portfolio swollen to $42 million, proof that risk, when seized, could yield wonders. Sarah met me at the airport, her embrace fierce, her eyes a storm of relief and reproach. I was terrified, she whispered, clinging to me. But you did it. You won. I held her close, the ocean's distant call a benediction. We both did, sweetheart. I trusted myself, and now I trust you to do the same. In that moment, the betrayal that had fractured us mended not perfectly, but with the strength of scars. Brad was a partner now, not a lover, our bond professional laced with mutual respect. Sarah eyed him warily across the baggage claim, but she nodded when I said, you don't have to trust him, just trust me. And as we drove home, the coastal road winding like a promise, I knew the real victory wasn't the money. It was the woman I'd become fierce free and finally at peace with my own power. The Monterey sky was a canvas of soft pinks and golds. As the plane touched down the Pacific, shimmering below like a mirror reflecting my newfound clarity. 3 months had passed since I'd boarded a flight to Hong Kong with Brad, a leap into the unknown that had carried me through neon-lit towers and high-stakes deals, transforming my $30 million empire into a $42 million legacy. The ocean's rhythm, a constant companion, through my battles now sang of peace, a hard-won serenity born of risk and revelation. I stepped off the plane, my skin kissed by Ty's sun, my heart lighter than it had been since Thomas's death. But as I scanned the airport terminal, it was Sarah's face I sought, her presence, the anchor I had risked everything to preserve. She stood by the baggage claim, her silhouette sharp against the crowd, her eyes a storm of relief and lingering reproach. I'd left her a note before departing, entrusting her with a power of attorney to protect our legacy if my gamble failed. I'm taking a chance on myself. Trust me as I trust you. Those words had been a bridge, fragile but unbroken. And now, as she ran to me, her embrace fierce, I felt it solidify. Mom, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. I was so scared. But you're back. You did it. Her arms tightened, grounding me, and for the first time in months, I felt whole, not just a widow, not just a mother, but a woman who'd reclaimed her fire. We drove home along the coastal road, the ocean's waves a gentle counterpoint to Sarah's questions. What happened in Hong Kong? She asked, her voice cautious, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror as if expecting Brad to materialize. I smiled, the memory of those frenetic months, vivid yet serene. It was a whirlwind, I said. Investment summits, late-night deals, and Macau tech startups in Shenzhen. Brad wasn't lying about the potential my portfolio grew to $42 million. But it wasn't just about the money, Sarah. It was about proving I could still choose my own path. Her brow furrowed, a shadow of doubt crossing her face. And Brad, you trust him now. The question was a knife sharp with the memory of his betrayal, his aliases, his chilling text. This isn't over. I shook my head, my voice steady. I don't trust him, sweetheart. I respect him as a partner, not a savior. He's a strategist like me. We worked together not for love, but for mutual gain. But I kept my eyes open always. I didn't tell her about the late-night meetings where I'd scrutinized every contract, cross-referenced every account with Frank Romano's contacts, ensuring Brad's moves aligned with our deal. Trust was a luxury I'd never afford him. Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I read your note, she said softly, about trusting you to take risks. I was so angry, Mom, but I get it now. You weren't running from me. You were running toward yourself. Her words, raw and honest, mended the final fracture between us. I reached for her hand, her grip, warm and fierce. I needed to know who I was without your father's shadow, I said. And I needed you to know you could trust me, not as a bank account, but as a woman. We pulled into the driveway of my Monterey home, the glass and stone facade glinting in the fading light. Inside, the air was warm, scented with the lavender candles Sarah had lit in my absence. We sat by the fire, the ocean's murmur a soft backdrop, and I shared fragments of my journey, not the deals, but the moments that reshaped me. The sunrise over Hong Kong's skyline, its chaos a mirror to my own reinvention. The Thai beach where I'd walked alone, the sand warm beneath my feet, realizing I didn't need Thomas's ghost or Sarah's protection to define me. I learned to approve of myself. I said, my voice quiet but firm. Not as a widow, not as a mother, but as Margaret Sullivan who can face any storm. Sarah's eyes glistened, a smile breaking through her tears. Dad would be proud, she said, not just of the money, but of you. You're unstoppable. The words, so simple, carried the weight of her trust, her love, and I felt a peace settle over me deeper than any I had known. But a shadow lingered, a question I couldn't shake. What was Brad's endgame? His partnership had been profitable, yes, but Frank's file, aliases, vanished. Wives, Vincent Rossi's name whispered of motives still hidden. Even now, in victory, I sensed the game wasn't over. The next morning, I met Frank at his gritty Monterey office, the air thick with the scent of old files. He'd tracked Brad to Singapore, where he was pitching new ventures, his trail as slippery as ever. You played him well, Frank said, a rare grin cracking his weathered face. But don't get comfortable. Men like him don't stop. I nodded, handing him a USB drive with encrypted records of our Hong Kong deals. Keep digging, I said. If he's tied to Rossi, to Pinnacle Partners, I want to know. Not for revenge, but for protection. Frank's eyes met mine, a spark of respect. You've changed, Margaret. You're not just surviving, you're hunting. That afternoon, Sarah and I walked the cliffs near my Carmel property, the ocean, a vast expanse of possibility below. She'd enrolled in an MBA program inspired by my leap, her own fire kindled. I want to be like you, she said, her voice steady. Not afraid to take risks, to trust my instincts. I smiled, the wind carrying my words. You already are, sweetheart. You faced Brad, faced me, and came out stronger. That's your legacy. As we stood there, the sun dipping into the sea, I felt the weight of Thomas's absence lift, replaced by a certainty that I'd carved my own path. Brad remained a shadow, his motives a lingering mystery, but he no longer held power over me. I'd transformed my grief into strength, my doubt into daring, and my love for Sarah into a bond that no betrayal could break. The ocean whispered its approval, its waves a lullaby of peace, and I knew at last that I was enough, not just for Sarah, not just for Thomas's empire, but for myself.